Lindsey from CoachParry.com, and today we're going to talk about the warm-up and why it is important. So pretty much before you do any type of exercise, you should really look to help yourself limber up and get ready for that activity. Warm-ups can take a variety of guises, from just starting off really slowly. I typically advocate at least a short walk before you do even your easiest of sessions, and certainly as we get older, or when we are in quite heavy periods of training where you might be tired and a little bit stiff and sore, doing a good warm-up can really help to prepare your muscles, and in particular your joints, tendons and ligaments, to just really be lubricated, make you feel more comfortable and make the entire session that much easier. Warming up and increasing range of motion can be done in a couple of ways. At CoachParry.com, we really prefer to do dynamic type of exercises, drills and stretching, and to give you some really practical examples of how to do that, I'm going to hand over to Shona, our head of strength and conditioning, to take you through some really cool examples.
All right, we often get asked the question around warm-ups, and I think in our times growing up, we've constantly been told that we have to stretch before we run. The science has moved on from there. Static stretching in its own entity in itself doesn't help with your warm-up in the way that we used to think it does. We have moved more towards doing some dynamic movements, and I'm going to dive into those and explain those in just a little bit. But the difference between static and dynamic stretching essentially is that static stretching is essentially just stretching the muscle fibers, holding that for a second as in a static sort of motion, and then those muscle fibers pull back together. Dynamic movements is where the muscle fibers are lengthening and contracting and extending over repetitive sort of movements. Dynamic flexibility has been shown now to improve your power output. And so static stretching has been taken, not to be used as a warm-up so much anymore for a couple of reasons. The first one is that there is very little correlation between static stretching and injury prevention. And so we were always taught that we have to do some stretching before warm-up, or as a warm-up before you're running, as part of injury prevention. However, static stretching there's no correlation between injury prevention and static stretching. The other aspects, and the reason why I mentioned that what's going on with your muscle fibers, is that when you're static stretching, you're pulling those muscle fibers apart. And what that does, it's not going to damage your muscle fibers, but when you're running, it just doesn't allow for an increase in power production. Those muscle fibers don't then have that elasticity to bounce back as much as we need them to for running. And this is the reason why we've dived a little bit more into dynamic stretching. So, to summarize that, essentially what you need to be doing is we need to be doing some dynamic stretching before you're running, and if you want to incorporate some static stretching after you're running, you're welcome to do that as a bit of a cool down. So the first one that we're going to look at is leg swings. So we do two different types of leg swings. We do a forward and a back leg swing, and this is really to start getting the hips, the quads, the hamstrings and the glutes waking up a little bit. So you're going to start gently swinging the leg forward and back. Try and keep your knees straight if you can, and then gently extend the range of motion that you're doing. So increase the range of motion that you are swinging your leg, and also start increasing the pace or the tempo of that leg swing. You want to do around a minimum of 10 on each side, but take it as how you're feeling. If your legs are feeling stiff and sore, spend a little bit more time there. We're then going to do leg swings side to side, and this is really focusing on the adductors quite a bit. So you want to be quite gentle with this one when you start. And same thing, you're going to swing your leg from side to side across the body and start increasing that range of motion that you do that movement in, and as well as the tempo as you're getting further and further along. Just remember that we are warming up, so have good intent while you're doing these dynamic stretches. The third one that we're doing is waking up the glutes, right? So the glutes, as we know, are vital for running. They play a massive role in stabilizing the hip. And so what we're going to do here is hold onto something for balance, and then you're going to cross one foot over the other, and you're going to sit yourself down in that position. Stand up, swap sides, and do the same thing on the other side. Try not to hold that into a long static stretch. Again, just remember this is a dynamic movement, and so you're wanting to feel the stretch and then move out of that movement. You can also then push your hand on your knee to almost amplify that stretch and a little bit more if you want to. And again, depending on how you're feeling, spend a little bit more time there if need be. The next one that we're going to look at is calves. And so what you're wanting to do is just lean against, have a bit of a forward lean against something, whether it's a wall or a cabinet, and you want to get good range of motion, so pushing up onto the toe and pushing down on the heel on the opposite foot, and then reciprocating that movement. So going up onto the toe, down onto the heel, but really ensure that you're getting the full range of motion, and then again you can increase the pace or the tempo thereof, and you're wanting to do around 15 to 20 on each leg, eventually building up that the pace is quite nice and fast. The next one we're going to do is again, it's a bit of a combination of warming up the groin, the glutes and the calves. So you're going to pull your knee up to your chest, squeeze your knee there, and at the same time go up onto your toe on the opposite foot. Put the swap sides and do the same thing on the other side from there. And then the last one you want to do, and if you do struggle with your knees, you can leave this one out, but we want to just warm up the hip flexors a little bit. And so you want to grab your knee up to your chest and then take a big step forward and lunge down into that position, really focusing on the hip flexor there. Stand up straight and do the same thing on the other side. Just be aware that you don't want your knee, your front knee, to be pushing over your toe in that movement, because we're really focusing on the hip flexor, so have good heel pressure on that front foot. So that dynamic warm-up you can do for all your runs. You can do that dynamic warm-up. I really recommend to do that dynamic warm-up as well before your strength sessions. However, then if you're doing a different sort of running session, if you're doing a higher intensity running session or a hill session or a speed session or a time trial or a race, there are a couple of running warm-ups that we really recommend that you do, and Lindsey's going to dive into those in a little bit with you now.
Now that Shona's taken you through a couple of really great examples of how you can limber up and get yourself ready for an activity, I just want to talk you through how to warm up for your high intensity sessions. It's one thing to get yourself ready and just limber up slowly and get going as you're moving into your easier sessions, but when we want to turn it on, do a high intensity, or before a race, you really want to be able to start those sessions feeling really good, really loose, and ready to perform at your best to get the best out of those workouts. So typically what we do there is take you through a very easy warm-up routine of 5 to 10 minutes of very easy jogging. You'd follow that by some of the mobility stuff that Shona took you through and showed you, and then we need to get the physiology and the body up and ready to go. That can work in one of two ways, and I'll tell you how we do it at coachparry.com, but I also just want to give an example of things that work slightly better for other individuals. So at coachparry.com, we like to then go through a routine of doing 30 seconds to 1 minute of essentially building yourself up to get yourself to the planned speed for the session that you're going to run. So that would typically involve getting slightly faster, slightly faster, slightly faster. Most people call those run-throughs or strides, over an 80 or 100 meter, or as I said, up to a minute sometimes, with a gentle jog or walk in between. And we repeat that between 3 and 6 times until you start to feel really ready to go and hit your workout. You can also do that in a slightly different way, and that is to go through the same routine where you're going to run nice and easy, limber up a bit, do some of those mobility drills and exercises that Shona took you through, and then give yourself about a 6-minute half marathon race pace stint. So that means you're picking it up, running at a bit of a tempo, but you could hold that pace for considerably longer than the 6 minutes, and the same thing happens. It just slowly brings your body up to temperature, makes you feel good and ready to hit that first interval flying. If you found this information useful, please click on the like button. And then please also have a look at some of our other videos, which you can access by clicking on the icons on the screen right now.